Welcome back everybody to the Burt Not Buy YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss how I overcomplicate this engine's external oiling system.
So if you think what we've done up until now is redneck, this is going to take the cake. Sick.
So we're back in the corner of my garage in the wintertime in Ohio. I'm realizing lately these videos are not super entertaining because the Champ car is down and this thing still doesn't run. Doing this correctly, or as correctly as we can now, means that this will last longer for more entertainment down the road. So again, today we're going to talk about the oiling system on the back of the block here. We're going to talk about some of the breather that comes out of the valve cover. So let's talk about that in this video. So I wrote up a list of things to consider called things to consider. First things first, this engine is fragile. It's stock because I didn't build it. $700, dude, I'll blow this thing up and get another one. 95% of this engine's life will be spent on the street. It's a street car, so constant throttle, constant RPM, a couple pulls here and there, a lot of pulls, but not constant full throttle driving, so we're gonna consider that street life. 5% of this car's life, just based on some actual math that I did, will be fighting for its life, otherwise known as track time. We're in Ohio. You can see all 4 seasons in one day. Definitely want to make sure that we plan for temperature swings, that's what I'm trying to say. I am its owner. And I wrote error 404, remorse not found, which was a lot funnier when I wrote it, it's kind of stupid. And then desire to avoid fire. That's an important one. This is actually a serious point. Safety is no joke, I don't fool around with safety. Where you're running these oil lines and where you're running breather lines. So those are important. Parts list, first things first, we need an oil sandwich plate. In order to get oil back into the engine, we have to get it out. So the first thing we need to consider is an oil sandwich plate. Allows us the ability to have an oil cooler feed and return, and then the turbo feed. It's got some other miscellaneous accessory ports that are 1/8 MPT, definitely useful. The turbo feed line. I have written on here that I need a 3AN because I have a precision turbo and engine journal bearing, but I will probably, in hindsight, after I wrote this, run a 4AN because I can build it and fit it to this engine. Turbo oil return needs to be a 10AN. Requires some welding. We got to put a bung in the oil pan. I'll explain why I'm going that route. A lot of people are like, just run it through the timing cover and it's so much easier. There's a reason. Requires a little bit of welding and OCD is a factor, so you'll see why in a minute. Also, the fact that that's not level is driving me crazy, so fix that. Now I'm happy. Oil cooler feed and return path. It will determine which sandwich plate we can get. Are we gonna go up and around the axle and come back forward? Are we gonna try to go straight down? Are we gonna go around the side of the block and hug the belt? What are we gonna do? So we gotta figure that out too. Breather line ports. Which side of the engine is less fiery when it leaks? When these engines fail, they start puking crankcase pressure, and that's gotta go somewhere. And if for some reason 2 criteria are met and it's loose and the engine fails, you're gonna have a lot of oil getting out of the engine. So quiz time, which side of the engine's hotter? It's the back. So we wanna run this out the front. So it's gonna be a little bit less clean on top when we run all those lines, but it's gonna be worth it in the end because it keeps potential oil leaks away from the angry side of the motor, which is, again, the back. So that's it for this. Let's go back over there. So back over here with the engine, you can see that it is leaning to the left. That is because these K-Series in their standard mounting layout lean 15 degrees towards the cabin of the vehicle. So we need to keep that in mind while we're doing all of this, especially the gravity-fed stuff like the turbo oil return. So if you can, when you put your engine on the stand, get it as close as you can to its layout in your vehicle. That way you can plan accordingly. But first things first, like I said earlier, in order to get oil back to the engine, we got to get it out in the first place. So the first thing we have to consider is the sandwich plate. Our list of things to consider stated, we got a lot of temperature swings in Ohio, and this thing is a street car. We need a thermostatic sandwich plate. It's the whole reason I wrote that list over there. We got to make sure the sandwich plate will stop flowing oil if it gets too cold. So we want to maintain a constant oil temp. We don't want to cool off the oil in this engine while it's sitting idling and then the engine's fully up to temp, right? Now we need to be able to go from this area here, however that ends up working out, across the block, and then we need to stay the F away from here with pressurized oil as much as possible, and then come up around the front of the turbo to this area here, and then go in the top right there. When I go to build that, I'll explain what parts I use. They're super easy to build. I need to get oil drained by gravity from here to here. Do you see the angle and the shallowness of the back of the pan right here? Problem is though, with all that oil, and especially the reservoir being up front here, when it sloshes back under acceleration, there's a chance that it may come up above the oil of the pan, and the return is going to be right here. So we need to apply what little and limited physics knowledge we have to this. So I'm going to draw something. Yeah, as you can see, this took me a couple tries to get this right, but what we have here is looking at the side of the engine. This area right here kind of sticks out backwards more than the actual like water jacket on the back of the engine in this area right here-ish. So we have a recess and some room we can play with right here. Again, this won't be a super fast car, but it will be a car that sees a lot of G-forces in every direction. So considering the fact that the oil, don't mind that, potentially could be at an angle like that, we want to make sure that that line has our oil line coming out of it as perpendicular as possible. Why, you ask? So the turbo's right here. We want as much of a steep angle headed down as possible before we get to a sharp angle to cross the oil center line, because it will come up into this line. This is exaggerated, but it will come up into this line and prohibit the turbo from draining. But if you get the line coming out of it perpendicular, it should continue to drain better than if this line went straight back to the turbo. Like so. At least that's how I see it in my head. You get a much better drain if the turbo is allowed to freely drain forward and then at a steep angle, and then come back at a lower angle through the oil. Like that. That wraps up my plans with the turbo oil return breather. So while there is a lot of space on the backside of the engine here, just all of this will be open. This area is gonna get mage spicy, dog. So there is no way that I am going to be willing to risk any more of a leak than I already have right here back in this area. That's a real concern. So we have a couple of options here. So we have the option to run breathers off of this spot, anywhere in here, maybe here, but probably less ideal, and then anywhere in this area. We also could run a fat breather off of here, but the strut tower for the car is really tight right here, so that'd have to do some weird path to go somewhere. So this area, maybe not so good, but chances are to stay as far away as possible from all of that stuff. Probably gonna go up front here. So I did some research to try and figure out like what tool I could use to make this relief in this oil pan that I'm trying to make, and I found Forstner bits that are meant for wood. Now the only good idea here is that shank is not indexed, so if it catches, it'll slip in the drill. I made a punch. I punched the area that I want this to be indexed to. Oh, it's gonna work. You've got to be kidding me. This is gonna work. That is absolutely by no means whatsoever the prettiest thing I've ever done. All right, so I got the oil pan off so we can finish drilling the hole all the way through it. Never did seal this thing to the engine because we had to do this. There's a whole video on everything I did in there, so go check that out. But right now we're gonna finish drilling a 3/4 hole through the side of this oil pan. And it actually turned out quite nice. It's on this side, it's what I wanted. It's nice and tight to the side of it, but like I said, that bit walked, so that's kind of a bummer, but how nice and tight that is. Now I'm gonna go sit this in the parts washer to dilute all of the oil and shavings I just put into it. Don't want that getting in the engine. And then drill some holes through the valve cover. We're gonna try to keep it all up front. It's gonna be a little difficult with the layout, but I think we'll figure it out. Dooley's over here to check, make sure everything's going all right. What do you think? I think what I'm gonna do now is drill some holes in the nice valve cover, and then I'm gonna strip this once it's welded and repaint it. But I think best bet, based on what I've seen here, is to center this up somewhere around here, and then maybe move this one to here and go in through right there. So that sums up all of the fab side of the work that I have to do until I start ordering some parts. These actually turned out really nice as well. Moved them a little bit from where I had them on the test valve cover there, so I think this will actually be a better setup. But that's the theory for now. So the next step is going to be to get these puppies over to Aaron Austin's house so that he can weld them up for me, and then we're gonna order some parts. I still haven't done that. Captain's log. Day 5,000 of this section of the project. It's taking a lot longer than I thought it would. Drywalling my basement, and that's part of the reason this is taking so long, but it also happens that I have this section, this like bench of 2x4s I made to cut my drywall. It's gonna become really handy for this. I got these bungs welded in. We're not gonna talk about those welds. They're gonna work. They're not the prettiest, but they're gonna work, and that's all that matters. What I'm trying to do right now is I'm getting ready to strip this thing and paint it. So I figured might as well get this out of here. That is sharp. And then get the spark plug tube seals out because I'm gonna replace those as well. You can see that I've already been working on this a little bit, and I thought, you know what, I better record this. That hurt my ears and my hand. Ditch the pipe wrench, get big ass channel locks you don't mind hitting with a hammer. Not exactly the prettiest thing ever, but once the channel locks butted up against the back of that nipple, it popped right out. However, when you're holding the channel locks, every time you strike it with a hammer, you hit yourself in the palm essentially with a lever, so it actually is kind of like whipping you. So that really hurts. Also use more heat right here, that'll help. And then don't actually hit the valve cover. But anyway, we're gonna wrinkle black this, so it'll actually probably cover a lot of that up. This is not the prettiest thing I've ever made for sure. So now the plan is to tap that hole with an NPT tap. Well, hopefully I can go deep enough in there to actually get thread engagement. And then we'll get a cap to put in there. You guys know how much I love my NPT caps, so we're gonna put that in there and hopefully cap that off. I've done worse things. We're gonna put this in a box and spray it with aircraft paint remover and get some of this paint off of it. I tried to sand it, but I'd rather just kind of strip it all the way down. Okay, so I sprayed the valve cover down with this stuff. I remember using this a while back, but I can't remember if it sucked or if it worked. Aircraft paint remover is supposed to be the best stuff ever, but it's been on there for like 10 minutes now, and I don't think anything's really happening. All right, so meanwhile, that thing's over there in the box. We're gonna talk about the oil pan. Christ, I pulled this card a long way. So this engine is K24A2. This initially came with a steel oil pan. Now we've got the aluminum one on it. Talked about that 1,000 times. Don't mind the weld. This pan is part of your bell housing, where the steel one has a bracket that I actually have and I can show you, but I have to go out to my shed and it's muddy. This one has alignment dowels. There's one right here and another one on the front corner up there. And this engine, when it had a steel oil pan, those alignment dowel holes were exposed, so corrosion got in there. So what you have to do is clean those out with a Dremel, which I already did because the pan is obviously held on by nothing but the dowels. When you clean those out, you want to make sure that they're still pretty tight, like as tight as you can get them to the alignment dowels, but you don't want them to be too loose because, again, it's part of your bell housing. So you want to make sure that this aligns pretty well, right? So just be careful when you're cleaning those out. I just used a Dremel with a little small, like 1/4-inch sander on it, and it worked out really nice. So I suppose while the cover's over there stripping, we can work on getting this bolted down. I ordered a whole bunch of miscellaneous stuff. This is a new throttle body gasket. There's one in there, but it's a used one. This is obviously a new exhaust manifold gasket. I go with the OE one. I don't like the ones that are like compressed foil because they have a tendency to blow out and leak. So I don't want those, but this is a giant pile of bolts. Each of these bolts is individually packaged in a package that is that long. So a little wasteful, if you ask me, but anyway. Yep. Oh, what are those? Oh, thermostat bolts. Forgot about these. I apologize that this video is just a very bland how-to, but we're getting there. I promise. There's some decent stuff coming. Also, quick note. The steel oil pans, instead of using the dowels that the aluminum pan uses, use these studs to index the pan. You got to get those out because you got to replace it with a bolt because the pan flange is thicker than that bolt is. So you can see I've chewed it up trying to get it out already, but we're going to add some heat and then hopefully spin it right out of there. Ourselves a nice clean gasket surface ready for the oil pan. We are not going to talk about what happened right there and forget all about it. It should be fine, honestly. Yep. It's on there, looks good. Let's do a couple other miscellaneous things and then we're gonna go check on the valve cover. stuff goes. We got thermostat housing on, new throttle body gasket, my little 1/4 inch UT cap in there that didn't go quite as deep as I wanted it to, with my tap bottomed out in that hole, but it is tight. It is for sure, it's tight. And then I cleaned up the gasket surface on both sides of the head and the manifold for a new exhaust manifold gasket. So this thing's getting really close to being ready to go back in the car, but we're gonna go focus on this. Well, that looks quite a bit better. It's not exactly perfect. There's a blemish there. That whole area kind of looks terrible, actually. And then another blemish there, and I don't know, it's cold in the garage and it's only 6 degrees outside right now, so that made this a little bit difficult. I'm high as a kite because the garage is full of fumes, but you can kind of see here, I was gonna run the 90s right off the valve cover, but I had to go with the 45s, and the reason being is the 90s put the AN lines right over top of that fuel pressure regulator, and the hood is really close right here. So 45s actually don't look too bad. We got usable space out here too, so that'll work out pretty nice. Now, as much as I hate doing part 1s and 2s, especially on videos like this, they're already kind of too long to begin with. I can't get 2 of the fittings for my turbo oil return or my oil feed for the next 30 days. And I don't want to wait that long to put that stuff in. So we're going to move on to that next video and then revisit this one after that. Also, I ordered a really, really nice oil sandwich plate that won't be here for another 2 weeks. So everything is, for some reason, back ordered right now. But that's all I got for this one. We'll see you in part 2.